All right, welcome back. We're going to be looking at inventory control a little bit more. And specifically, remember those cost flow assumptions? Let's kick it off with that. So we start with a quick few review questions, which is, what do FIFO and LIFO stand for? And which cost assumption is not commonly used in Canada? I'd encourage you to pause and see if you can remember these. FIFO stands for first in, first out, and LIFO stands for last in, first out. And between these two, the one cost assumption which is not as commonly used in Canada is LIFO. So we move into what exactly we hope to answer in this lesson. How does LIFO, FIFO, and average cost flow assumptions work in perpetual inventory systems? So perpetual means they're updated as we go along. Means every single time that we make a purchase or a sale that we're going to be using these cost flow assumptions here. And physical counts are too costly to do 4 times a year, so how do companies actually determine the inventory for interim financial statements, meaning quarterly, monthly? If products in a store are marked up 40% and net sales are $10,000, what is the value of the cost of goods sold? And this last little bit gives you a hint on how we actually end up doing those inventory for the interim financial statements. So let's jump right in. This is perpetual inventory and inventory estimates. And we start off with FIFO, and this is exactly what's happening here. We've got a whole bunch of purchases and sales along the way. So here we've got a start September 1st. There are 100 units purchased at $10 per unit, which is a value of $1,000. 100 times 10, which gives us this 1,000. But we end up selling off 20 units. Well, there's only these units in inventory, so that means that our unit price is going to be 10, and we're going to be selling, well, 10 times 20 will end up being $200 for the value, and that leaves an inventory with only 80 units left. But then we end up going off and buying 30 more units, but in this case it's a different price, and this is where it starts to get a little bit more complicated. Now we've got a total value of, well, 4,500 is the value here. What exactly is our total value? Well, we've got 80 units at $10 per unit and 30 at 15. Now, what do we end up doing with this one? We sell 85 units. Well, remember, first in, first out says that we're going to sell off the first ones. So when we take a look at this, if we've got 80 left here from our very first batch, then it means that the other 5 will end up coming from this unit cost of 15. So we've got here 80 times 10 plus 5 times 15 is our overall cost of goods sold in this case. Now, this is going to get really complicated and messy. And again, we'll emphasize that typically when we're doing perpetual inventory systems and we're going to be using these different cost assumptions, that we have a computer that's doing all this stuff in behind the scenes. So we switch on over to LIFO, and with LIFO it stands for last in, first out. So let's walk through this. Here we've got a purchase of 100 units at a unit price of 10, and then we end up selling them off. But last in, first out doesn't change anything here. We still sold off those 20 units at $10, and we're left with 80 at $10. But this is where it gets complicated once again, that we buy more units of the same product, 30 more units, at a different unit price. So how exactly do we deal with this when we end up getting to the very end? Well, with 85 units that we're selling, it means that we've got 80. Where do we come up with this? First, we sell off the 30 that were last in, so those go first, and then it means that we have a remaining 55 that are sold off at the $10 per unit price. So last in, first out says we start calculating based upon the 30, and then the remaining balance goes back one. So this is where we end up coming up with 30 times 15 and 50 times 10. And our cost of goods sold in this case is 1,200. Moving on into our third method of calculating these things. Again, emphasizing that this is difficult to do, and this is typically why we have computers to do it. So again, we have the buy, we have the sell, we have the buy, but here it's a little bit different. In this case, we get to the very bottom, and now what we have is an average. So our unit price on average is calculated. Now, the average up here is going to be $10, and that's because everything else before it was $10, so it would be, well, we've got 100 units, and then we end up selling off 20 of them, but the unit price at this point is 10. But this is where it starts to get a little bit different. Where exactly does this unit price come from? Well, it comes from, we've got 80 units at $10 a unit, and we've got 30 units at $15 a unit. When we add those together, we divide by 110, we end up getting 11.36. Where does the 110 come from? Well, there are a total of 80 plus 30 units. So we're taking the overall value and dividing it by the number of units that we have, and whether or not we're talking about computers or something else. And so when we go off to sell this, or our inventory will end up being listed here as 80 times our 10 plus 30 times the 15 minus 85, because that's what we're selling, times the overall average price, which was 11.36, coming from this average unit price here. Again, our computers are automatically going to be updating this overall average price. In fact, this is typically what you'd find if you were working in something like buying and selling stocks. Alright, just a quick little update to the slides here because there were a few mistakes. And we finished this off. What exactly was the cost of goods sold? Well, it is in fact 85 times the overall average price, which was 11.36, which gives us a cost of goods sold of 965. If you wanted to double check your inventory number, you know that there was originally 110 units in stock here, and that means that you could end up having our, 25 times 11.36 should match up with this number here. Alright, so moving on, and this has been emphasized in the last three, which is the role of technology. Now, there's an awful lot of stuff going on there. In fact, there's probably even round-off errors along the way too. And due to the complexity of perpetual systems and cost flow assumption, computers are essential to keeping track of inventories. So the moment that you scan a barcode in, it updates the inventory, says, okay, this was sold, and somewhere along the line, some items are purchased, and it will update the average cost or how many units are available and which ones came first. So now we move on to this next one, our ending inventory estimates. And there's two different methods that we have here. Gross profit method, which applies a gross profit margin to net sales, commonly used for interim financial statements in periodic systems. And then there's the retail inventory method, which uses the cost to retail percentage is applied to ending inventory at retail prices. Let's just go ahead and change that. Alright, there we go. Alright, let's skip on to the next slide and let's get an example of how the gross profit method is actually applied. Suppose a gross profit margin for a company is 30%, and that's going to be dependent upon what your good is and what exactly your profit margins are. The net sales for the quarter is a total of $100,000. Beginning inventory is $50,000 and purchases of $40,000 are made. Calculate the cost of goods sold and the ending inventory. And again, this is just going to be an estimate. So what exactly is our estimated cost of goods sold? Well, here's where we go with this. Since our profit margin is 30%, that means that our cost of goods sold is 70% of our net sales. Well, what exactly are our net sales? Based upon these numbers up here, it's 100,000. So that means our cost of goods sold is going to be 70% of this 100,000. Now, what if this was 20%, just as a hypothetical? Well, then that means that we would be using 80%, because 100% minus 20% would give us the 80%, and that would mean that it would be 80,000. In this case, we've got a cost of goods sold approximated at $70,000. Now we go back and we review a little formula that we had, which is our ending inventory is equal to starting inventory plus purchases minus cost of goods sold. So let's go back up, take a look at our question. Our beginning inventory is 50,000. Okay, we had purchases of 40, so 50 plus 40 is going to be 90, and our cost of goods sold is 70, so we subtract the 70. So 50 plus 40 is 90, 90 minus 70 is going to be 20,000. So we approximate our ending inventory as 20,000. That is the gross profit method based upon a 30% profit or net sales, gross profit margin for net sales. Let's look at number 2. Suppose the ending inventory at a retail prices is $15,000 and net sales for the month were $2,000. If the cost of goods available for sale is 10 and the same goods retail for $12,000, estimate the cost of goods sold and the cost of ending inventory. This whole method will hinge on a few ratios here. First, we need to take a look at the cost to retail ratio. So when we take a look at that, we're going to be using these numbers, which is the goods available for sale, which is 10,000, and these 12,000. It will tell us that if we divide the 10 divided by the 12, that 83% is what we'd expect to be the cost of goods sold. Now, 83% or 0.83, if we end up selling $2,000 worth of net sales, then it tells us that roughly we should expect that 2,000 times 83%, 83% of this 2,000 will be the cost of goods sold. So we take that and we multiply it, and we end up getting cost of goods sold to be approximated as 2,000 times 0.83, which is approximately equal to 1,666.67. Now we're not done there, because we're also going to try and estimate what our cost of ending inventory is. Well, we started with $15,000 here. Our ending inventory was $15,000. We know that we sold 2, so that means that there should be $13,000 left. Now, the cost of ending inventory should be roughly equal to 83% of that. So here's our calculations. 15 minus the 2 is 13,000, and our ending inventory, cost of ending inventory would be roughly 13,000 times 0.83, which gives us 10,833.33. And that is it. So we've now at this point been able to go through and see the different cost of flow assumptions. We've emphasized that computers are super important, and here we've also shown at least how we can approximate methods of valuing cost of goods sold, ending inventory, using different methods like the gross profit method and the retail inventory method, so that we can end up doing approximations within interim periods. That's it for now. I hope you've enjoyed. If you ever have any questions, feel free to reach out. I'd be happy to answer them.